September 1939. The outskirts of Wizna, northeastern Poland. Lieutenant Władysław Raginis stands on the edge of a shallow trench, scanning the riverbank through a pair of field binoculars. The morning air is cold, damp, and heavy with fog. Somewhere in that haze, engines growl distant at first, then rising, a steady metallic thunder rolling closer with every second. His men wait beside him, engineers, reservists, a few veterans from the September campaign's opening days. Barely 700 in all, holding a thin defensive line stretched across the Narew River. Behind them lies open farmland, no backup, no retreat. Raginis lowers the binoculars. Positions, he says quietly. Orders ripple through the trenches. Sandbags are adjusted, rifles readied, ammunition boxes cracked open. A single 37mm anti-tank gun is dragged into place, its barrel aimed toward the narrow bridge that connects the Polish side to the main road. The crew works in silence, their faces streaked with soot and sweat. The fog begins to thin. Black silhouettes emerge on the far ridge tanks, lined in columns, engines rumbling like thunder under steel. Raginis watches them advance, slow and confident. German panzers. A full division moving against them. He glances at the Polish flag fluttering from a damaged pole near the bunker and exhales. "Wait for it," he murmurs. The first panzer rolls onto the bridge, treads clattering on the planks. The gunner tracks the target, finger tight on the trigger. Raginis raises his hand. A single shot cracks through the morning air. The shell slams into the lead tank's hull. Smoke bursts from the impact. The line is drawn. The battle for Wizna has begun. Inside the damp concrete bunker, the radio spits static between bursts of artillery noise. A faint voice pushes through the interference. The sound of a commander far away. Calm, but final. "Hold, as long as possible." The message fades. Everyone in the room understands what it means. No reinforcements, no retreat. Raginis turns off the radio and looks around the table. His officers wait, eyes tired but steady. He doesn't give them a speech, just a sentence. "We stay." No one objects. The men get to work. Shovels scrape dirt. Crates of ammunition are hauled forward. Sandbags stacked higher against the bunker walls. The smell of oil and sweat mixes with damp air. A corporal checks the food supply, 2 days of rations at best. Another rolls out a spool of wire toward the bridge, hands shaking slightly as he connects it to the detonator. "If they cross," Raginis says, "make sure they don't cross back." He walks outside for a moment, boots sinking into the pain, wet soil. The distant rumble of artillery grows louder, the kind that moves closer with every shell. Overhead, the sky is low and grey, the kind that never lets light through. He glances at the men by the gun. The same faces from yesterday, covered in dirt and ash but still waiting for orders. "Stay sharp," he says. "They're coming." The ground trembles again. A shell lands somewhere upriver, shaking dust loose from the bunker roof. The first barrage is about to begin. The first shells fall before sunrise. The forest beyond the Narew River erupts in flashes of light, followed by the hollow thud of explosions. Earth sprays against the bunker walls. Inside, men cover their ears as the ceiling rains dust and gravel. The bombardment grows heavier. Trees splinter, machine gun nests collapse. A runner stumbles inside, gasping, face streaked with blood. "They're crossing the ridge!" Raginis steps out into the open air. The morning sky glows orange from fire. Through the drifting smoke, dark shapes appear. Panzers rolling forward in formation. Steel monsters grinding through mud and debris. "Target the lead tank," he orders. The 37mm crew hunch behind their gun. The loader shoves a shell into the breach. The gunner tracks the moving shadow through his scope. "Range, 200. Fire." The shot slams out, echoing across the valley. The shell strikes the panzer's side, sparks bursting against armor. The tank halts, smoke trailing from its hull. The men cheer a short, desperate sound that's swallowed by another explosion. The next German shell lands beside them, throwing 2 soldiers to the ground. "Reload," someone shouts. The gun fires again and again. Brass casings pile at their feet, each shot answered by artillery. Ragini's moves between positions, shouting orders through the smoke. His uniform is torn, his face streaked with dirt, but his voice doesn't waver. He helps a wounded man drag himself into cover, then turns back toward the gun line. He refuses to go underground. As long as one gun still fires, he says, steady and clear over the chaos. This line stands. The men hear him and fire again. By midday, the horizon burns. German infantry have reached the riverbank, crawling behind the advancing tanks. The air stinks of cordite and wet soil. The Polish sappers crouch by the detonator box, waiting for the order. Now, Ragini says. A thumb slams the plunger down. The bridge explodes in a thunderclap. Flames leap skyward as planks, steel, and human silhouettes are thrown into the air. Chunks of burning debris rain down into the river, hissing as they hit the water. The crossing is gone, nothing left but wreckage and black smoke drifting downstream. For a moment, the men cheer. Then, the retaliation begins. The Germans answer with artillery from across the ridge. Shells fall in rapid succession, shaking the ground like rolling thunder. The whistle of Stuka dive bombers pierces the noise. The sky itself seems to scream. The first bombs strike the riverbank. One lands square on a bunker entrance, collapsing the roof and sealing half the crew inside. Muffled, shouts echo from beneath the rubble. Ragini rushes forward, coughing through the dust. He digs with his hands, pulling chunks of concrete and twisted rebar aside. A soldier emerges gasping, face grey with ash. Another doesn't move. "Get him out!" Ragini shouts. They drag the survivor clear as another explosion shakes the ground. He looks toward the river, the bridge still burning, the enemy regrouping on the opposite side. He wipes the grit from his face with a trembling hand and forces a thin smile. "They'll have to swim," he mutters. Behind him, the men reload, rebuild, and wait. The battle isn't over, it's only crossed to their side. Evening turns the sky crimson. The smoke from burning tanks drifts low across the fields, mixing with mist and ash until the world seems painted in blood and dust. Across the river, the Germans move again. The bridge is gone, but the wreckage remains, twisted beams and splintered planks lying just beneath the surface. Tanks begin to crawl over it, one after another, using the debris as they're crossing. Infantry follows close behind, their helmets glinting faintly in the fading light. Ragini spots them through his binoculars. "They're coming through the shallows," he says quietly. "Gunners, reposition." The crew drags the 37mm gun through the mud, slipping, swearing, straining against its weight. They dig in by the tree line, the barrel glowing faintly red from the last barrage. "Range, 150 meters, the gunner calls. "Fire." The shot rings out, slamming into a Panzer's front plate. Smoke gushes from its turret, flames licking through the foot seams. Another shell follows, hitting a second tank as it tries to cross the broken bridge. For each one destroyed, 3 more push forward. Machine guns rake the trenches. Mortars fall in clumps, sending dirt and shrapnel over the wounded. A medic sprints out under fire to reach a man screaming in the open. He collapses halfway, cut down mid-step. No one calls for a retreat. Ragini moves from crater to crater, steadying his men, shouting over the thunder of guns. His voice is raw, but still clear. "Keep firing." The air is thick with heat and cordite. Every explosion lights their faces for an instant, tired, filthy, unbroken. They hold their ground as night swallows the field. Darkness falls, but the battlefield doesn't sleep. It only changes color. The fires still burn where the bridge once stood, their glow reflecting off the river like molten glass. Every few minutes, a flare bursts overhead, washing the ruins in a cold white light before fading back into black. The tanks prowl the edges of the Polish line, their engines growling in circles, guns firing at every shadow that moves. Machine guns answer back, short bursts echoing across the valley, then going quiet as ammunition runs dry. Inside the bunker, the air is heavy and still. Men sit against the walls, passing a canteen from hand to hand. Someone breaks what's left of a loaf of bread into thin pieces and divides it without a word. Ragini sits at a small wooden table, a candle flickering beside him. He pulls a torn piece of paper from his notebook and begins to write. The pencil shakes slightly as he presses it down. Still holding, he folds the note and gives it to a young runner. "Take it to the radio post," he says. The boy nods and disappears into the smoke. None of them know it will be the last message sent from Wizna. Outside, a shell lands close, shaking the ground. Dust rains from the ceiling. Someone coughs blood. Raginis wipes his face with his sleeve and listens. Between the thunder of distant guns, he can hear the river flowing calm, untouched by the chaos around it. When dawn finally creeps over the hills, the landscape looks unrecognizable. Burned trees, shattered bunkers, bodies half buried in mud. Nothing moves but the smoke. And yet, somehow, the defense still stands. The sun hangs low, hidden behind a wall of smoke. The battlefield is barely recognizable, a wasteland of mud, craters, and twisted steel. Only 2 strongpoints remain. Everything else has been flattened or burned. Raginis limps through the rubble, his leg wrapped in a blood-stained bandage. He moves slowly, leaning on a rifle for support. Every few steps, he stops to look around for movement, for survivors. The air smells of burned fuel and wet earth. He reaches the nearest bunker. Inside, a handful of men are still alive, blackened with soot, eyes hollow but alert. They look up when he enters. No one salutes anymore. There's no need. "How many shells left?" he asks. "6, sir." "Make them count." They load the 37mm gun for what might be the last time. Outside, the distant hum of German armor grows louder, mixed with the heavy thud of infantry boots. The men wait, fingers tight on triggers. Through the periscope slit, Raginis watches figures move through. The haze helmets, rifles, bayonets glinting under the dull light. He raises his hand. Not yet. The first boots reach the wire. Fire. The gun thunders. The front line erupts again, one more explosion, one more stand against the inevitable. The Germans fall back briefly, then return with mortars and grenades. Each minute feels like an hour. Each shot feels heavier than the last. When the firing stops, smoke covers everything. Raginis kneels beside a soldier, clutching the tattered Polish flag. "Hide it," he says quietly. "Under that stone. If we fall, it stays." The soldier nods and buries the flag beneath the rubble. Above them, another shell whistles in. The ground shakes. The last line is nearly gone. Afternoon bleeds into smoke and fire. The air hums with the sound of shells and collapsing walls. The last Polish bunker, Raginis' post, is barely holding together. Concrete cracks like glass under the constant pounding. The men inside can hardly hear their own voices over the roar. A shell tears through the bunker wall. The blast throws Raginis to the ground, his ears ringing, his side torn open by shrapnel. He tries to stand, but stumbles, blood soaking through his uniform. The light from the hole flickers as dust settles the war outside, now only meters away. Through the chaos, a metallic voice booms from a loudspeaker across the field. "Lay down your arms. You fought bravely. Surrender." Silence fills the bunker for the first time in hours. The men turn to their commander. Raginis leans against the wall, barely conscious, eyes open but distant. He sees their faces, the same men who have stood with him since the first shot. "Go," he says, voice raw. "Surrender. You've done enough." They hesitate, shaken. "Sir." He cuts them off with a faint nod. "That's an order." One by one, they rise, hands trembling, and move toward the exit. The last man looks back, waiting for him. Raginis doesn't move. He sits beside the shattered radio, pistol resting on his lap. The Polish flag, torn and covered in soot, still hangs over the rubble behind him. He looks at it for a long moment, then closes his eyes. Outside, the Germans push forward. The sound of boots and gunfire closes in. Then, a single muffled blast echoes from within the bunker. And just like that, the defense of Wizna is over. When the guns finally stop, the valley is silent. Smoke drifts lazily across the shattered fields. The river runs black, with oil and ash. German soldiers move cautiously through the ruins, rifles ready, unsure if the defenders are truly gone. They pass the remains of trenches and bunkers, nothing but scorched concrete and twisted steel. The air smells of metal and fire. Bodies lie half buried in mud, Polish and German alike. A medic kneels beside a wrecked tank, shaking his head. An officer removes his helmet, staring at the scene. "This was one company," he mutters. Another answers quietly, "Less." They begin to count. Dozens of destroyed vehicles, artillery pieces, reduced to fragments. Hundreds of their own men dead or missing. All of it caused by a force barely 700 strong men who refused to retreat, who fought until there was nothing left to fire. Near what's left of the command bunker, a small group stops. There, half covered by debris, lies the body of Lieutenant Władysław Raginis. One hand rests near a pistol. Beside him, the Polish flag still hangs, torn, blackened, but standing. Word spreads quickly through the German lines. Even General Heinz Guderian, commander of the 11th Isek Panzer Corps, arrives to see it himself. He looks at the bunker for a long moment, then raises his hand in salute. No words, just respect. Orders are given to bury the Polish defenders where they fell. The Germans dig shallow graves beside the bunkers and mark them with simple wooden crosses. When the wind passes, the flags flutter. One black, one white, both silent witnesses to what happened here. Years later, the fields around Wizna are quiet again. The river flows the same way it always has, winding past green hills and patches of forest that once hid the sound of war. Grass covers the trenches now. Rusted helmets lie half buried in the dirt. The bunkers still stand, cracked and weathered, their walls scarred by shrapnel, silent monuments to a stand no one was supposed to survive. Historians give it a name, the Polish Thermopylae, a 3-day battle where 700 held back 40,000, where courage weighed more than steel and will outlasted firepower. Old film reels show what's left: broken artillery, melted tank tracks, faded photographs of young men who never came home. Their names are carved into stone near the road leading into Wizna. Travelers pass by without realizing they're driving over the same ground that burned for 3 days in September 1939. Voiceover. They didn't fight for victory. They fought so the world would know Poland did not surrender quietly. Every nation has its story of defiance, a moment where defeat becomes something else, something that lives longer than the war itself. Wizna became that moment for Poland. The wind moves through the grass, whispering across the old bunkers, carrying the echo of distant gunfire. They held until there was nothing left to hold, and by doing so, they became legend. The screen fades to black. A single flag waves over the ruins, red and white against grey sky, the same colors that once marked the line between freedom and silence.